Welcome back to Data Driven Leadership. I'm your host, Jess Carter. I am so excited to be back. For those of you who have followed the podcast over maybe several episodes or a season here, may have noticed that I've been not behind the mic for a few months, and that's for a reason that is going to be part of our episode theme today. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in February at the ripe old age of 35 and have been going through chemotherapy and had surgery in July and am finally getting back to it. So I've been joking that there isn't someone that you'll interact with today or hear from that is more excited to be with you than me. And so I've been dealing with some of those challenges. And again, we're going to talk through kind of the power of data and some of the reflections from a leadership perspective on this episode. I have brought with us our producer, who you may remember from some previous episodes, Chelsea Gill. She has her own journey to share thematically. Chelsea, do you want to share that?
Yeah. Jess, welcome back. And am I breaking the news early to share with everyone that you are, in fact, in remission? Like we can celebrate that, right? We can celebrate that you are better and cancer-free.
I'm better. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I wanted to get that out there. There's no reason for our audience to worry or anything like that. So
no, very grateful.
Yes, I have my own journey. Back in 2019, I was experiencing some symptoms that I thought was really odd and went to a primary care physician, had them take some blood work, and it turns out that the blood work was normal, right? And so according to your physician, you're fine and you just move on and you've checked that box, see you later. But I knew in my gut something was wrong. I knew it wasn't right. So I went to go see a specialist. And they did an upper GI scope. And, I thought, oh, maybe I have this or that. It'll be something that's like really treatable. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be sitting in my office at work and get a phone call from that physician and say, you've been diagnosed with cancer. I found cancer in your pathology report, and I'm going to have to refer you to an oncologist. And in that 2 minutes, like your whole world just kind of falls apart in some ways. You're like, what? You're blindsided by it. You don't know how to process it. And so, yes, I have, luckily for me, we found it very early and I was able to treat it. And just like you, Jess, I am cancer-free and have been in remission for 4 years. So
woohoo,
good times. Good times.
Yeah, we're celebrating that.
We are
It's
celebrating.
good news. But how old were you? Do you mind me asking?
Oh, geez. Okay. So this was 4 years ago. I'm 38, so 34.
Okay. Yeah, I think just to be really transparent with our audience, we really struggled with, does it make sense for us to do an episode about this? Because the reality was neither of us are oncologists, neither of us are cancer specialists or experts, but there is this reality that I think, we're going to air this episode in October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And it's also about, it's being kind of transparent and vulnerable about where I've been. I didn't just get this haircut because I felt like it. And so I think we just wanted to be, as we discussed Chelsea sort of showed up and was very supportive of me through this journey, which I'm very grateful for. One of the things we tripped over was this conversation about the things we've learned along this journey of each of ours that really relates to being a great leader.
Yep.
And I think we just started riffing and it was like, hey, it just makes sense to take a moment and be vulnerable and authentic and really connect with our listeners in a real way about our own reflections of recent challenges we've been through. And that seemed important.
Well, we're all human. We all have experienced health issues. And I think it's safe to say that I'm sure everyone who's listened to this or who's listening to this episode either knows someone very close to them in their immediate family or a friend who has been diagnosed with cancer. So this is something that touches every single person. And wearing your data-driven leadership hat is not just for in the office. It is also very much so in your personal life. So I think that's what we're here to talk about, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, so I think what we'll do is we have kind of these topics we've been sort of riffing on. They kind of start with each of our experiences about how we learned some of these things through cancer, but then it's just so easily applied to your workspace and your leadership sort of scope. And so the first thing, Chelsea already talked about it. We talked about listening to your body, that she went and got blood work done and it said she was fine. And she knew that that wasn't right, Chelsea? Like you were like, this can't be what fine is, right?
Right. You know that it's not normal to have wake up with night sweats. You know, it's not normal to be losing a large amount of hair, right? You know that it's not
Right.
normal to be experiencing acid reflux every single day. So there were certain things that I just knew were not part of my normal life, right? This wasn't going to be my new
Right.
normal. I knew something was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about living the rest of your life with some of those symptoms is like, hang on, there's no way. And so it's just so easy to be told, like, just wait. Let's wait and see. That's a phrase I've heard from so many people when I kind of share their experience. Just wait and see. We'll monitor this. I also didn't wait and see. I had like a very bizarre symptom. I never found a lump. There was never something I could notice. There was a little tiny symptom I experienced once or twice in December. It was something that would be so easy as a young mom to just discard because I got bigger fish to fry in life. But I listened and wouldn't take no for an answer and went and got checked. And they all thought I had an infection. They all thought I needed an antibiotic and I'd be fine. And everyone, the mammogram specialist, the ultrasound radiologist, the biopsy specialist, they were all just shocked when we found out that this was cancer. My primary care physician couldn't believe it. And actually, I thought I had a lump in my armpit 6 months earlier and went and had my doctor check it out. And so even that,
Wow.
the interest that was on my mind. I mean, my doctor came back and was like, "Do you remember that we did that?" I didn't. She's like, "Your body was sending you signals and you were listening well enough, you know." But I think back to, like listening to your body and understanding, I think so long I was a marathoner and I was kind of taught to beat my body into submission. Just go teach it that mentally you can break those walls and you can do more. And it's like that's cool. We can do that. But there is an important signal to like, what does it need? Down to like, what do you need to eat this morning for the day you have ahead of you? I'm not telling you to be a psycho, but I think we're acknowledging it was a humbling experience to learn that it matters that your body is giving you feedback.
Well, Jess,
right?
how many data points did you have to get through before you actually knew, right? For me, it was 2 doctors, different blood works, different pathology reports, different procedures. It took multiple data points to get there.
Yeah. Like 5 for me, right? Like it was like my own experience of a symptom, me talking to my doctor to get a rec to an OBGYN, to then go get a mammogram, to then go get an ultrasound, and then get a biopsy, right? It's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, not only that, I think that there's something to be said. If you're experiencing symptoms, it is worth writing that down, documenting it, because you know how, your car squeaks and then you go to the body shop and they're like, nothing's happening. Or you go to the mechanic, right? And it doesn't squeak anymore, right? The same thing can happen when I was going to a healthcare provider. He was like, you're not experiencing these symptoms right this second. So I'm just having a hard time understanding like what you're actually experiencing. And so I think that there's something to be said about writing all your symptoms down and documenting like time of day that you're having it, so that when you go to see a physician, you're like, look, I've collected all of this data to showcase what I'm going through.
Right. What you're also saying that I think is really, so when it comes to you're right, tracking the data, tracking the symptoms, making sure you're taking care of your health, you're not just outsourcing that to a doctor, right? When you look at data-driven leadership, there's this concept too of, I got to be honest with you, Chelsea, I've noticed more in meetings that I'm showing up to. If I listen to my body in a work meeting, I'm in a productive, professional work session, I'm still experiencing emotions or my chest will get tight. I'm regularly getting feedback from my body that I wasn't conscious to before, and it's making me a better leader. It's like my body is sort of tapping me on the shoulder saying, hey, did you know that this stresses you out? Did you know that you're worried about this? Maybe if you wonder why you're worried about this, you'll realize it's because you're not staffed for that. You don't have the budget for this. And so I'm realizing it's actually making me a better employee, a better leader.
I wonder, Jess, if that's something that is going to stick with you through the end of time. I remember that being the case for me for, 6 months post cancer, but I'm 4 years now removed from that. And I still have to remind myself to listen. Right. And so it's common sense, it seems like, right? But you have to like literally remind yourself every single day to listen to your body.
I think it's easy to think like, shh, quiet, I'm trying to work. Like, body, quiet. And it's just so interesting to be like, hold on, I'm having a really intense reaction to something that just happened. Why? Right. And your other point about the amount of data and collecting it, I think the other thing that again applies to data-driven leadership is self-advocacy, which you did a phenomenal job of. I like to think from the first time I was ever in a hospital was having a kiddo, like I had to learn self-advocate. I just thought doctors, they think deeply about you all the time and they don't have any other patients. Well, like light bulb. And it's not to villainize them. It's to realize you are one of a number of patients, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands. It is your job to show your work and make sure they understand you are going to be a passionate detective in this manner, right?
So, Jess, if I recall my journey, there were several decisions that I made based off of data that was presented to me. I'm curious, because this is really fresh for you. What decisions did you make about your treatment, about surgery, about what you're eating and ingesting every single day, about your exercise routine? What data was presented to you, and how seriously did you take that data?
Let's get into it. So, a couple things. I like those topics. I'll try to remember each of them. So, something that was really interesting to me is that there's different studies, but they show that you can reduce your risk of breast cancer. You can also reduce your risk of recurrence of breast cancer by, some studies say 18%, some say as much as 30, or even one I think that said 50, by exercising 120 to 150 minutes a week.
Bad news for me.
Right. So like, when you hear that, it's just astounding because I'm listening. Like the other thing that's confusing is percentages kind of get flipped around. So, when I'm going into chemo, I'm like, so we're poisoning my body to heal my body. This feels, I'm a little bit of a hippie behind the scenes, Chelsea. So I didn't love that. I was like, chemo was the hard thing it was a hard pill for me to swallow. It's also the singular thing that healed me. And so I remember asking, does going through this chemo increase my risk of other cancers? And they're like, yeah, yes. And so it would be like, hey, this percent, I'm making it up. I'm not, don't listen to this and trust it, but it'd be like 6 or 20%. But then we talk about the exercise and it's 18 to 30%. And so these numbers get thrown around and it's like, oh yeah, like you can reduce your risk by 30%, or, oh, hey, it only increases your risk of other cancers by 18. And it's like, hold on, do these balance each other out? So I had to really sit down and write down all of these stats I heard and decide for myself what I wanted to do. There is a standard of care, which I didn't know that language before. That means there's like a process and there's a sort of decided path for you when you're diagnosed with some of these more common cancers. And so they were kind of like, you're going to go through chemo, you're going to have surgery, we'll go from there depending on what comes out of surgery. I had to really stop and go through that and decide, okay, but is that the path for me? There are other options out there, but they're probably not covered by insurance. They're probably stuff I'd have to travel to do. But I went and researched 18 to 30 other types of therapies, looked up the research behind them, the efficacy of them, my ability to access them or pay for them. And we sort of landed on, I don't like this phrase, but like I ended up with the kind of cancer that has basically the most targeted treatment of really almost any cancer. So most people are getting all these specialty treatments because they recognize now that cancers in someone's body is so unique to their own physiology that I kind of got lucky that I basically got targeted therapy with the cancer I had as a standard of care. So that means it was covered by insurance. There was a researched path there, it worked. But that data, you better believe I'm getting my exercise in, is what I'm trying to say. And then the other piece, just quickly here, is I do want the world, like this is important to me for the world to know. So I went through some data about surgery. So when we talk about surgery, the very first thing they ask you is what kind of reconstruction do you want? So there is an assumption in that question that you want reconstruction. I had done an enormous amount of research. I'm totally excited for people who want to pursue reconstruction. But in my path, no one had told me that there's an option to do something called going flat, which is to just remove the tissue altogether, close it up, and move on. Reconstruction usually requires 2 to 3 surgeries at least. There's a whole bunch of data about, people who've had some issues around it, or, I didn't want to sit there and wait until I could be happy with my body again. I just wanted to work on self-acceptance. My kids are a young age. I want to go play tag. I don't want to wait. So it's not to villainize reconstruction. I'm so happy that path exists.
But you also made that decision based off of other data points, right? Like you have families who has gone through this, and you want to make sure that, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at all, but it wasn't just the statistics you were seeing. Like you had other data points. And I think that's important to know.
I don't know. Like I think a lot of people ask me too, like, do you have BRCA? And I'm like, I don't. I did get genetic testing. I don't have BRCA. It's quite random that at 35, this happened. But I do think that we've had aggressive cancers in my family. And so for me, the idea, if you do reconstruction, my oncologist shared with me that you still have about 7% risk of recurrence. If you go flat, you have 1% risk of recurrence because they're just microscopically trying to reduce as much breast tissue as they can in your body. So for me, to your point, I just chose to be really aggressive right now so that hopefully we don't have to do any of this again, right? So that data was important. Like I was making decisions based off of how I felt, like with my family history of other cancers and what we've been through, but also with the statistics I had in front of me about how to just be as aggressive as I could be.
Let's talk about that 1%.
I don't like her.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about how to say this. So depending on your personality, you could take that 1% and be like, I am in the clear. There is no way that will be me. Or you could be type A and be like, hey, there's still a chance and I'm going to do everything I can to take precautions. Maybe it is getting in your exercise. Maybe it is changing up your diet a bit. Maybe it is the annual testing and blood work and scans that you can get. Talk me through how you're thinking about this. And I'm sure this is like different emotions day by day, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. 1%. How do we feel about her?
Because you're thinking in breast cancers, there's a lot of people who get it. So 1% is still thousands of people per year, right? So one, I see a great therapist to work through not being afraid the rest of my life. That was really hard during chemo. I just felt terrified of this chasing me and being on my mind every day. I remember I talked to a doctor who said, how often are you thinking about cancer? And I was like, every 20 minutes of my every day. So I think here's what matters, Chelsea, from a data perspective. There was nothing that could get me to zero. No doctor is going to say, if you do these things, you'll never get breast cancer again, right? So to me, what I ended up landing on for my own health and my own, situation is 1% is as close to zero as they can say. And I have no control over that 1%. I just don't. And so I'm going to manage the things I can control, which you brought up earlier, like food and clothing, like the kinds of cookware I use and a whole bunch of other stuff like products. I'd never been real careful about my food sources, like meat sources. I'm on a Mediterranean diet now per all of my doctors, and what clothing I wear. Like I remember somebody saying, if you think about it, what you put in your body and what you put on your body are things that are impacting your physiology all day, your entire life. And so unless you're walking around naked. So I think for me,
we're not advising.
No, we don't advise that. But thinking about those things a little bit more thoughtfully has been helpful for me to not worry about the part I can't control and worry about the rest that I can.
So, Jess, you've always been a little bit more thoughtful when you're hearing data points like this. I take a very different approach. I hear 1% and I think, I am in the clear. No need to worry about it. I just want to move on, close this chapter, move on. And I'm compartmentalizing. I'm sure a therapist could have a field day with this. I'm sure. But the experience I had with this, and then I have some advice, is that you might hear a statistic. And for me, I was 34 years old, still would love to have had kids at that point, and wanted to know how this treatment was going to impact my ability to have children in the future. And based off of the cancer that I had, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I kept hearing low chance. Like it's not gonna impact you. The radiation is in your small intestine. It's not gonna impact anything in your reproductive organ. So you'll be fine, right? And so I took that for what it was, like low chance. I don't need to do anything ahead of time to prepare myself, right? Like there are procedures and things you can go to protect yourself. And I didn't do those things. And I wish I would have, looking back, right? And so I think that there's something to be said about stopping to like really think about if it's 1% or if it's low. Like what if you fall into that low category? What if you aren't the lucky ones that fall into the other bucket, right? And that for me, like impacted the rest of my life, right? So not being able to have children or going through fertility issues because, and every doctor I've been to has said, it's because of your radiation therapy that you've had. And so it's just My advice is to take it for what it is, but like really think about, well, what if? Like, what if I do fall into that bucket, and then make strategic decisions based off of that, right? I assume that a lot of people are like me who say, low chance, not happening. And it's not always the case. There are people who are really lucky and there are people who are not.
Well, and I think like thinking, to your point about the 1%, there's part of me that thinks in my 1%, we're kind of applying that more broadly. There's literally nothing I can do. I think when you're told, hey, it's low, to your point, we're signaling if there are options, maybe we take them. Maybe we contemplate the long term and don't just, because I think I don't know about you, I just feel this pressure around doctors when I was younger of like, hey, like, yeah, it's a low chance, don't worry about it. They're moving on, they're moving quick. And it just like at work, again, in a meeting, when somebody kind of wants you to just move with them and they don't really want a bunch of, interference about a decision they're making, they kind of just move you along. And the skill set as a leader to say, hang on a second, what you just said is important to me. How much time do I have to make a decision about what I think about what you just said? That is so powerful. My doula taught me that when I was giving birth, to say, hang on a second. You are asking me about if I want to pursue X, Y, or Z next as a next step. Do I have 20 minutes? Do I have 20 seconds? Do you have until your next appointment? When do we lose time for me to make a decision? Because then you don't have to make it right now, but at least you have a chance to make a decision.
Well, the outcome is always going to be a better outcome if you really take a step back and think through it. And this can apply to cancer. This can apply to other health issues. And this can apply to your point, the office world, right? Corporate America, or wherever you are leading.
People kind of want to rush you along in a lot of areas of our lives, and to be willing to be the person that's like, hang on a second. I'm not sure I'm with you. I get that you want me to be. Do I have permission and time to go process whether I'm with you or not? That's a powerhouse leadership move.
Well, and something that you did really well, Jess, and I would like you to talk through this, is that you had several people in your corner that you call an advisory board, right? And I want you to talk through that, about how you use that advisory board through cancer, but this also applies to your leadership position, right? That you also need an advisory board day to day. And so walk me through like how that came to be, and if it was organic or if it was purposeful. I'm curious.
Well, hang on. First of all, were you the one that gave me that language? I forget if it was you or someone else who was like, think of your doctors as an advisory board. Like there's not just one.
It's possible because I had several. I think I had 4 at the time.
So the advice I got that I think is also really important when it comes to agency as a leader is nobody is in control of your treatment other than you. Your doctor is not in control of your treatment. You are. And so I had a medical oncologist. That is doctor language for you're getting chemotherapy. You only have a medical oncologist unless you're getting chemotherapy. I had a surgical oncologist for my surgery. I have a primary care physician, and then I have a whole host of other things. I have a nutritionist, I have PT, I've got OT, I've got all these people helping me. That's why I've got these sleeves on. You should watch this on the YouTube channel if you want to see the haircut and the sleeves. I think I got a little bit overwhelmed at first because not often, but occasionally as I was kind of interviewing people to fill these seats on the advisory board, I started by just assuming one doctor would do everything for me. And then as I asked questions, I realized they would say, like, I'm not really the person for that. Thank God. Thank God they didn't just try to fill all the cups. They were open about, I'm not really going to be a nutritionist for you, but I can tell you what I know. And then you should talk to a nutritionist. And then I could seek that out. But it was this overarching concept of, I'm the one running this treatment. Everyone else has a seat on my advisory board. They're not calling the shots. I am. It is my job. It is my agency. And if you're not doing what I'd like you to do, we will remove you from the board.
So, but not everyone on your advisory board was medical, right? You also had individuals at work that were kind of guiding you and cheering you on. And you had friends and family who are also kind of considered to be part of your advisory board as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because there was so much more that outside of work and the medical that you had to think about. Your children, your marriage,
right?
All of it.
You're absolutely right. We had support systems on the advisory board. I mean, there were, I think even if you apply this to work, right? What I'm saying is maybe this is not, people aren't going to love this, but pleasing your boss isn't good leadership. Hard stop. If you're going to be a good data-driven leader, your job is to understand real gaps that work at your company, at your nonprofit, in your community, wherever you're a leader, and to help fill them and help align people to those gaps being filled in a way that helps them fulfill their mission, vision, and values. And sometimes that means creating tension. It doesn't mean people pleasing the person ahead of you on an org chart every time. That's not the goal. That's not leadership. And I think realizing right now, who's your advisory board? The other reason I think this is important, you have to listen and hear them out. And so it ensures that you are working on, am I listening and am I receiving feedback, or am I talking at everyone and I'm dictating instead of receive, like maybe I'm being a jerk this week. Who on my advisory board is going to call me and be like, dude, what's happening? Like, why are you showing up the way that you are? We need an advisory board at work. We need one for our health. Everybody needs an advisory board.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Mic drop, Jess.
I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. And I have learned like some serious things out of it that I think make me a better Jess and a better leader. And I'm sure you feel that way too, right?
Of course. I think that going through that also taught me other things, such as delegating is okay, right? I felt like a better leader because I was forced to delegate in that moment when I was going through treatment, right? I couldn't do it all. I couldn't work my 40-hour work week and be exhausted, so exhausted. Like this isn't I went for a run and I'm tired. This is
right
on a different level. So Jess and I are here to share our stories with you, not because we're looking for sympathy. We don't want you to be worried about us in any way, shape, or form. We are here celebrating the fact that we are both in remission, but also recognize that there are a lot of people going through this right now, and we feel for them. We are here for them, and we want to support them.
And we want to share, like, one, like I was really passionate about being open about this journey because I felt so alone walking through a chemo bay where everyone was frankly 2 or 3 times my age. And I want people to understand there is some data out there about our like 30s and 40s and cancers really being pretty predominant in that 30s and 40s camp right now, and not really knowing why, but noticing that compared to 50s, 60s, 70s, it's like doubling or tripling in the 30s and 40s, and at least in the US. I just want people to know that they're not alone. They're not alone if they're going through this at a younger age. But I do think, again, then there's lessons, there's value out of this that, Chelsea, we wanted people to hear. Like, again, listening to your body is both important for your health. It's also important for you to be a good leader. I think handling what's in front of you, don't borrow stuff you can't control, but decide if you want to borrow the things you can. And I think that we're both saying there's agency for you to make that choice, and you don't need to ever feel rushed out of a decision for yourself as a leader. And then like having an advisory board, like I think it's such an easy walk away from this episode just to stop and jot down on your phone, as you sit in a parking lot somewhere today, like who's on my advisory board, and do I have some spots open I need to fill? Is somebody going to speak to me? Do I need an advisor that's going to give me hard truths? Do I need an advisor who's going to actually challenge me at work? Do I need an advisor who's going to actually make sure that I'm taking care of my body? There's room on everybody's advisory board if you haven't been thinking about that practically and proactively, and filling that's going to make you a better leader. So I think as we both reflected and sort of riffed earlier, it just landed on this feels like stuff we should share, and it feels like it's aligned to the podcast, and it's worth both of us deciding to be maybe a little bit vulnerable and hope that people appreciate the intent here and just have a quick chat about more on the leadership side of things and some of the things we both have learned on our journeys.
And we know this episode is a little bit out of the norm, but we will be getting back to regularly scheduled programming the next episode drop. So thank you for listening.
What, you mean we shouldn't do podcast episodes about cancer every time?
Maybe not.
Maybe we both want to move on. Let's move on. Okay?
Let's close that book. Move on.
Here. All right. Hey, Chelsea, you didn't have to do this, and it is vulnerable. Thank you for doing this.
No, thank you.
Guys, thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jess Carter. This is our producer, Chelsea Gill. Don't forget to follow Data Driven Leadership wherever you get your podcasts, and please rate and review this and let us know how these topics are transforming your business and you. We can't wait for you to join us on the next episode. See ya.